Will the hall please come to order? There is a quorum present. Welcome residents and taxpayers, town officials, town meeting members, and interested parties to the fourth session of 2024 Spring Annual Town Meeting. Would any town meeting member, newly elected or appointed, please rise for who has not taken the oath of office, please rise at this time for the oath of office. Okay. Please raise your right hand, and after I say the word "I," state your name, and then repeat what I say. I do solemnly swear and affirm that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon me as a town meeting member according to the Natick Home Rule Charter and bylaws of the town, laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and the Constitution of the United States. Welcome. At this time, will we all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence, particularly with those in mind serving around the world on our behalf. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We're assembled as follows. Seated to my right is Diane Packer, Interim Town Clerk. Seated to my immediate left is Cody Jacobs, Finance Committee Secretary. Next to Mr. Jacobs is Todd Gillenwater, Finance Committee Chair. And next to Todd is Karis North, Town Council, down in the well. Furthest from me is Catherine Coughlin, Chair of the Select Board. And seated next to Catherine is Jamie Erickson, Town Administrator. Please remember that in the forward left-hand side, forward center seats are reserved for town meeting members only. There are a number of people who I know have mentioned to me need to sit elsewhere for one reason or another, and I will be aware that they are up there. If the center seats or the forward seats are the ones that I count more often than not during a hand count. So if you're milling around and there's a hand count, it's time to do the circle with the chair and run around the chair to get into one of the chairs in the designated seat so I can count your hand for hand count. There are 3 members, of course, that sit off those seats, the 2 members on the stage and the 1 member down in the well. All of the seating is reserved for taxpayers and interested parties. We do request that the department heads and other speakers sit in the forward right-hand section of the hall. Rules haven't changed, not going to change, going to stay as they are, and we will continue with those rules. You might remember that we've concluded all business except Article 18, 28, 21, and 23. We will begin with Article 18 as that was moved to the first order of business tonight. Article 18 is a question with regards to adopt the specialized energy code. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
Mr. Moderator, town meeting members, the Finance Committee recommends favorable action on the subject matter of Article 18 as printed in the Finance Committee recommendation book on pages 102 and 103, and I so move.
Second. Moved by Mr. Jacobs, seconded by Mr. Gillenwater. The motion as it appears in the Finance Committee recommendation book. To speak to the matter, Ian? Will your presentation take longer than 10 minutes?
Takes 7.5 minutes.
Very good.
Yes.
You have the floor for 7.5. No.
Okay, thank you.
For the amount of time you might need.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and good evening, town meeting members. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak to Article 18 regarding the adoption of the Specialized Energy Code. My name is Ann Lentel. I currently serve as chair of the Net Zero Committee, which is co-sponsoring this article along with the Select Board. I'm joined here this evening with some of my fellow Net Zero Committee members, as well as the town's Sustainability Director, Ms. Jillian Wilson-Martin. We're going to go through some information today. At its core, Article 18 encourages but does not require electrification of new construction. So that's what it is in the kind of simplest form. And I'm going to walk you through some of the high-level points as well as some of the benefits of adopting this code. Next slide, please. So this slide shows some more information on the timeline and why this code is so important. So importantly, Article 18 helps advance town meeting's net zero goal, which was adopted in 2018. After the net zero goal was adopted, the town conducted an inventory of its greenhouse gas emissions for the net zero plan and discovered that 65% of Natick's emissions come from buildings. So as a result, the net zero plan, which was unanimously endorsed by all major elected boards in 2021, articulates electrification of buildings as a key strategy. And last year at Springtown meeting, today's article was previewed as an upcoming action item. Next slide, please. So as I touched on earlier, the specialized code is for new construction only. Existing buildings, retrofits, and remodels are not affected. Right now, new construction is a very small piece of the total, adding about 1% of the total building space each year. But you can see here in the green part of this graph how that adds up over time. By 2050, which is when our net zero goal is targeted, new buildings built after 2023 will make up 27% of all building space. So although the specialized code will have a modest impact today, it's still critical in helping us meet our goal over time. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the different levels of the energy codes. So in Massachusetts, the state dictates what codes municipalities can adopt. The codes build on each other, as you can see on the right-hand side. Natick is a stretch code community, which we've been since 2010. The specialized code, which you can see on the top, it's an incremental change. It's actually an amendment to the existing stretch code rather than a comprehensive set of changes, as it only applies to new construction. The specialized code was made available in 2023 as required by the 2021 Massachusetts climate law, so we are now able to introduce it at town meeting for a vote. Next slide, please. So here are some of the basics of the specialized code. So as I mentioned, it's new construction only. Renovations and alterations are not impacted. It facilitates but does not require electrification of new buildings, and there are several pathways to reach that, which I'll touch on in a moment. And if adopted today, we are proposing an implementation date of July 1st of 2025. So it won't affect any projects currently in process, and it gives builders more than a year before this goes into effect. Next slide, please. So the code is quite flexible and offers multiple pathways for compliance. So here we show a simplified look at what this would mean for a single-family residential home under 4,000 square feet. So for that scenario, there are 3 pathways. The first is all electric, which has no additional requirements from the existing code in Natick. The second is zero energy, which means that the home through on-site renewable energy generation produces the same amount of energy that it consumes, so it balances out to zero. Or mixed fuel, which would also include pre-wiring for future electrification and a small solar requirement. Note that for these homes, both the zero energy and the mixed fuel homes could use fossil fuels. And more broadly speaking, for multifamily and commercial construction, the pathways are very similar there as well. There's an all-electric pathway and some mixed fossil fuel options also. Next slide, please. So one of the important benefits of the code is that it preserves choice while protecting the consumer. So as I just walked through, the builder decides. Yes, the code encourages all electric new construction, but it doesn't require it in all cases. You can use fossil fuels. At the same time, it does protect the consumer by pre-wiring for future electrification. So it saves the consumer from having to do retrofits down the road, which can be very costly. Next slide, please. So overall, there are several benefits of code adoption. We've already touched on the importance of reducing emission from our number one source, which is buildings, as well as preserving choice while protecting the consumer. But I also want to highlight a few others. So the code will ensure Natick's new construction has high energy efficiency and better indoor air quality, which is important for public health. It also does not have a significant impact on upfront costs and also saves the homeowner money in long-term operating costs. The code will also increase our grant eligibility. Adoption of this code is a prerequisite for future funding from the state, and we believe from other entities as well. And lastly, the code provides consistency with surrounding areas. So 36 towns have already adopted it. It's a number that keeps going up. 3 of Natick's 6 neighbors have already adopted it. Wayland is voting on it either this week or next week. Framingham is also considering this for an upcoming meeting. And in fact, just last week on Wednesday, Ashland voted to adopt the code in their town meeting. Next slide, please. So it's important for us to highlight just the level of public engagement we've had leading up to today. So we've held several public forums to engage various stakeholders in this topic. We've had members from Mass Save and the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources, including those who wrote the code, generously share their time in several of these forums to answer technical questions and to share their expertise with Natick, including at our Builders Forum, our public forum, and with several of the public bodies listed here. Importantly, I'd like to mention that we've had the opportunity to present the details of Article 18 to all of the public bodies listed here, and all have voted for favorable action on Article 18, including the Finance Committee, of course, which you've just heard, the Planning Board, the Economic Development Committee, the School Committee, and of course the Select Board, which is co-sponsoring this article with the Net Zero Committee. Next slide, please. So that's it. That's our summary. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to the specialized code. We hope you will vote to adopt Article 18 to ensure we meet our net zero goals for the future for Natick. Thank you.
The motion is to the floor. Debate on the matter. Mr. Jacobs, I can see who is over there. I don't need to be prodded to do that. Thank you.
Cody Jacobs, Precinct 2. Mr. Moderator, the administration brought to our attention 2 small Scrivener's errors in the motion text that was submitted to the Finance Committee and printed in the book. So I believe they're already corrected on the screen, but I just wanted to...
I have no idea what you're saying. Could you speak into the microphone, please?
Yep. Mr. Moderator.
Thank you.
No problem. The administration brought to our attention 2 small Scrivener's errors in the book with respect to the motion text that was submitted to the Finance Committee. They've already been corrected on the slide, but I wanted to correct for the record what's in the book. If I could
What are the
point those
errors
out. Okay,
in the book?
So on the 3rd line of the motion text where it says RC space 9, the 9 should not be there. 9 should be taken out. And it's not there on the screen, but it is in the book. Where the bold under definitions for stretch energy code, the first line of that definition, it says CMR 22 and 231. It should just say 23. So that last 1 should not be there. Again, already corrected in the screen, but just to get it corrected in the book. I don't know if I need to formally move to do that, but.
Where was that correction?
The next one was where it says stretch energy code. That first line, it says codified by the combination of 225 CMR 22, and in the book it says 231, but it should just say 23. Oh, it's on.
My book says 2.3. If I'm,
There's two definitions for specialized energy code.
I'm sorry, for stretch energy code, where it says stretch energy code. That's, I think I missaid it. So on page 103, right above section 2 purpose, it says stretch energy.
103.
Yeah, on 103.
Okay. I was looking at the other one, wrong one.
Sorry, yeah.
I see it.
Okay,
I see
so
it.
yeah, I don't know if I need to move to correct that or.
Does everybody see those 2 errors that have been made? Typos? Without objection, we'll correct those. Scribners? I don't see any objections. Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. We did have debate on Member Scott.
Thank you. Roger Scott, Precinct 10. Question from Ms. Lintel. When you did your studies, is there any consideration what effect that has on the grid? You have 36 towns, and we're probably going to grow some more in the state. Has there any studies done that in the long term? I know it's outdated, the grid, but what about the time that it's going to be replaced by the time we implement this in July of next year?
To the member's question.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Thank you so much for that. So a couple of things that I want to say about the grid. So today the grid is actually operating 20% below the all-time high, which was in 2006. And the other thing in terms of whether the incremental kind of load on the grid as a result of Article 18 is actually going to be quite minimal. And there's 2 reasons why. The first is because it's new construction only, which represents such a small portion of the overall, real estate transactions that happen. I shared a slide, it's 1%, of new buildings each year. And also, they are so highly efficient that the demand of electricity from the homes are significantly lower than existing homes. So we have a slide in the appendix I'm happy to walk through with a little bit more specificity there. But in general, they're about 50% more efficient, so they require less electricity in order to heat and cool the homes. That being said, there are plans to expand the grid. So Eversource has filed plans to increase the grid capacity by 180%. So they're also preparing for more and more electrification of the buildings and lots of other things in the future.
Add-on question for that. With the advent of the EVs, and that is going to increase tremendously by 2030, has that also been considered on the overall effect on the grid? You're going to have a rate of change in the grid. It's going to be much slower. If they're going to do 180, they're going to have to get increased bills from the customers and things like that to do that. And it's going to take time for them to get fully funded. And the government will probably be lagging because of the current economy. But has that EV expansion been considered in this, and just not a housing matter, a building matter?
To the member's question.
Yes, to the answer to that question, yes. And I would add, in addition to EVs, like other things that we're seeing kind of more market demands for electricity in general. So we had a representative from DOER share a lot more about the demands on the grid and feeling quite confident that Article 18, like the expansions in the grids and all the other demands that are required from not just new construction, but you mentioned EVs and other things, feeling quite confident that the grid would be ready and is ready to handle some of these incremental changes along with it.
Thank you.
Mr. Scott. All set? Mr. Poliandri.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Simone Poliandri, Precinct 6. Through you, I have a question on the language of the motion, if you can help me clarify. In Section 2 purpose, it says toward the end that specialized energy code is this language that speaks about both new construction and existing buildings, although is my understanding that this is only for new construction?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I can
Go ahead.
clarify. Thank you. So the base and the stretch codes, which are mentioned here in the purpose, and also the slide we had with the little triangle, that affects all buildings. So the stretch code, so Natick is a stretch code community, so that's the code that governs our buildings today, existing buildings and the like. That's not, on the agenda. Those would stay the same. So the specialized code is an add-on to the stretch code, and that is the component that applies just to new construction.
Okay, just the new one. Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, thank you.
Member Awkward? Oh, jeez.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. It's excellent. I'm happy to see the work that you're doing and continue to move forward, progress. I'm just curious how, if 65% of this work is being driven by buildings, and 27% of that by 2050 will be addressed by new construction, what other things are we going to do to deal with that other 35% in order to hit the 2050 goal?
That's the work of the Net Zero Committee, so I look forward to sharing a lot more about that in the future. I think that's a great question, and although the specialized code is small, as it only affects a small percentage of buildings today, it matters. We still need to do it to reach our goal, but you're correct in pointing out, because it doesn't address existing buildings, there's still opportunities there to create more energy efficiency to help meet our goals. So I look forward to speaking on that in the future at some point.
Down front?
Shantanu Inamdar, Precinct 3, through you, Mr. Moderator. Is there a way to quantify an estimate on how much the initial cost goes up for this kind of electrification?
Quantify it was the cost.
Yep,
The
absolutely.
cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you don't mind actually going back to the slide with kind of the three different arrows, I can talk a little bit about that. So it depends on the pathway. So the one pathway that's all electric, there's no change in cost because it's the exact same as the stretch code, so there's nothing different about that. For the mixed fuel use, that's just pre-wiring, which we've spoken to a local electrician who said it's a small, minimal cost. And for the solar array, based on the median new home price in Natick and the cost of what that solar array would be, it would be about a 1% difference in the cost. Now, on multifamily, I would say it's important that to point out that is addressed by a standard of energy efficiency called Passive House. And there's been independent research conducted on Passive House standards. And in general, those costs building under those standards are 1% to 4% higher before incentives. So that's really important. Before incentives. So once those incentives are included, the cost goes away, and in some cases it goes negative. It's actually a cost savings, which is why so many multifamily developers have adopted Passive House already. Great question, thank you.
So, thank you. One more follow-up real quick is, one of the bullets mentioned that it impacts Natick's eligibility for grants and funds. Is that an overarching thing? You can not be eligible for grants and funds, or not allowed to apply for anything, or is it only in relation to, construction or building? Does that even impact school funding?
Oh, great question. So if we could go to slide 21, actually, if you don't mind, I'd be happy to clarify that. So it has to do with our climate funding, which could affect schools, as we have received some grant funding to do some energy efficiency projects for the school. Perfect. So as you can see, right now we're a green community, which is here on the left-hand side. These are the criteria for the state of Massachusetts to be a green community. And Natick has been really fortunate to have received $2 million in grants from the state for our climate initiatives over the last few years. There's a new standard now called Climate Leaders, which you can see here on the right-hand side. We've kind of reached our limit in terms of grant funding under green communities, and there's no cap right now for us to apply for climate leaders. But as you can see on the side, there are prerequisites for applying for that, and adopting the specialized code is one of them.
Thank you so much. This is great work. Thanks.
Thank you.
Member Collins?
Kathy Collins, Precinct 9. Mr. Moderator, may I do it from my seat?
I'm sorry?
May I do this from my seat?
Please do.
Thank you. A question through you. If we're wiring all these houses, whether or not they go electric, is there a likelihood, or what is the likelihood, that we'll have to beef up our inspection department?
To the member's question,
Yes.
is there a,
I can
do you
answer.
want to take a shot at it?
Sure,
And
I'll
then
take a shot.
I want a town official to respond to that too.
Oh, okay, we can do that.
Start first, then I'll follow.
Okay, perfect. Yes. So, so the building inspector would be the person who would enforce this and would sign off on any, just kind of similarly with any certificates of occupancy. So, in speaking with the building inspector, our understanding is that this wouldn't add any, like additional steps or additional capacity required to enforce this. I do believe the town just hired a new inspector recently, though, so there is just some additional capacity there. And then I'll hand it over to you. Yeah.
So I put an invitation out to the building inspector to be here. Is he not here?
I'm not aware of him here, no. I can answer the question, though.
You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jamie Erickson, Town Administrator. I have also spoken with the Building Inspector, David Gusmini. The filled position was actually a vacant position due to retirement, so we're at full staff right now. But no, there's no anticipation that this would add additional needs to that department. What's adding additional needs to that department is just the sheer volume of work already happening in Natick. That's a very busy department. They process well over 5,000 permits a year. This would not add substantially to that number, so we do not anticipate new staffing needs.
Ms. Collins.
Thank you. In debate, I would support this even if we did need to add an additional inspector, because I think pre-wiring makes a lot of sense, and leaving it up to the homeowner whether they want to go electric or not. I live in a house that was built in 1910, and moving a wire through it up and down is easy, side to side is impossible. So I think pre-wiring makes a lot of sense before the sheetrock goes up. So I'm supporting this article. Thank you.
Member LaFleur? Sandy?
Sandy LaFleur, Precinct 9, Grandview Street. Can you tell me at what point triggers a renovation to have to change to conforming with this new code?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm happy to answer that as well.
Are you a building inspector or expert?
I'm not.
You are not. Is there anyone, no one is here from the building department, correct? Because this is a technical question.
Yeah.
That would trigger the building inspector to take an action.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and I want an expert of that department to answer. Can that be done?
Can I ask the question to be repeated?
Could you repeat the question, please?
I would like to know if you're doing a renovation, at what point you trigger the need to go to the new code. It's not a new construction, but for instance, if you increase your house by 50%, the building code says that you have to go over to the specialized code. If you add more than 1,000 square feet, it has to go to the specialized code. I was reading this on mass.gov. I didn't see it on any of your slides.
To the member's question.
Certainly, just briefly, this is only for new construction. So renovations or additions would not be triggered to go to the specialized code.
That's not what I read online, so that's why I asked the question. Okay, so you're saying that if I have a ranch house, it's 1,100 square feet. I want to put a second story on it. I don't have to follow all the rules.
That's, may I answer the question?
To the member's question.
So just briefly, all the rules, yes, you do have to follow the rules.
The specialized.
The specialized code, you would not be following the.
So I wouldn't be required to have a HERS rating of 42.
Well, that's a different question.
Well,
the
that's what I'm
specialized
talking about, the
code-
specialized code.
I'm just trying to
We
understand.
can't have two people talking at the same time. Allow the person at the podium to finish what he or she is saying, and then you can ask your question, Sandra, okay? Do you want to finish what you were saying, sir?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. For additions or renovations, the specialized code would not be triggered, just new construction. A renovation, as mentioned, such as adding a second floor to a single-family home, single-story house right now, would not trigger the specialized code. It would trigger the stretch code, but it would not trigger the specialized code.
Ms. LaFleur. You have one more question?
My second question.
This is your third, I think, isn't it?
I thought it was my second question. I had to repeat my question.
Ask a question.
Okay, so did the stretch code change since we implemented it so that it now covers rehabs and additions?
To
I
the
can answer
member's
that.
question.
Yes. So the stretch code they did make some changes. And in fact, if I may also offer, one of the things that's confusing is they also call it the specialized stretch code, and then there's the specialized code. So when you were on I'm not sure, but perhaps when you were on the mass.gov website, that may be something that may have kind of confused the two. But yes, there were some updates made to the stretch code recently, within the last year or two.
Okay, I'll just go into debate whether I
Thank you.
have 2 or 3 questions, I don't know. I'm not going to vote for this tonight. We already have the stretch code. It has morphed from the days when we adopted it in 2007. It's good enough for me. I'm not ready for the specialized code. I know that it would put nice products in brand new homes, and that's nice, and I look forward to that. And I think that market forces will improve 4,000 square foot homes beyond belief, and we will reap the energy savings in them, but we don't need to demand it, and the stretch code is tough enough. So I thank you.
Member Connolly. Down front, please. Page.
Thank you. Mr. Moderator, Paul Connolly, Precinct 6. A question. Page 103. On Section 2, Purpose, the first line, I was wondering if there is any significance to the 22.00 and 23.00 when nothing else in the thing has that. What's the significance of having the 00? And if it's not significant, should it be removed?
Ms. North.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Those references are to the Code of Regulations that and the stretch energy code itself, and they are incorporated by reference into the bylaw, so they need to be in the bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Okay. Very good. Member Linehan.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mike Lynn, Precinct 6. My first question refers to page 103. Applicability, the Energy Code applies to residential and commercial buildings. Does it apply to municipal buildings?
To the member's question.
Yes, it does.
Thank you. Second question. If we're looking at energy conservation, one would normally look to places like Norway and Canada for codes. And their codes always include heat exchangers. And I didn't see anything in here about the requirement for heat exchangers. Does the Energy Code reference heat exchangers?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't studied the codes of Norway or Canada. I'm not sure kind of what would be included in that and what would be comparable in this code.
Are you asking whether our codes require
Whether
the heat
this
exchangers?
code that we're being asked to adopt includes heat
The new
exchangers?
adopted code, would that include heat exchangers?
Yes.
Is that a better way of phrasing the question?
So just in simple terms, so if that's through electrification, then yes, that would be through the all-electric pathway. And if it's through fossil fuels, then it would be through the other two pathways that it would be allowed.
For the record, no one from the department, the building department's here, so that question cannot be responded to with some certainty.
Thank you, sir. Third question. As I was reading through this, I think that it said the solar requirements could be met by rooftop or non-building mounted solar arrays, but I believe that our planning board had brought before some zoning rules a couple of things ago that said no standalone solar arrays. Is a standalone solar array allowed, that I believe is allowed in this code, in fact not allowed by our planning board?
To the member's question, do you know, are you familiar with our zoning?
I can't answer the
arrays?
question about the zoning, but I can answer what's in the code.
Okay, then why don't you start with the code?
I'll just answer.
I'm trying to figure this all out so we get all the information out. Speak to the code, and then I will insist that somebody that knows our zoning will speak to the array portion that appears in our zoning. So to the member's question.
The specialized code allows solar to be installed on rooftop or on site.
And with regards to what we have passed here for arrays.
I
Mr.
just
Erickson.
have a clarifying just restatement of the question specific to the zoning code, so I know I'm answering the correct question.
Mr. Linehan.
My recollection, granted it's not what it used to be, is that at one point when the planning board had brought items before town meeting, one of the issues was freestanding, that they did not want freestanding solar arrays, which you see up in New Hampshire all the time. And whether this code allows it or not, if it's banned somewhere else in our documents, is it banned somewhere else in our documents?
Thank you. That'll help to clarify. The short answer is no, it's not banned elsewhere in our documents.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Because I think that was my third question.
It is.
I generally support this. And the answer that I do have concerns, and I don't have a fourth question to ask, but we have submitted a grant for a new school, and schools' reimbursement levels depend on using pre-existing and pre-approved designs for the school buildings, which is why this high school was built after the Whitman-Hanson model, because we get more reimbursement. And my concern is that, because we don't have enough questions to ask, whether if we choose an existing model to get more reimbursement, we cannot actually use that model because it doesn't meet the specialized code if unless that's why it was pushed off to July 1st, 2025. The other issue is if this is truly about saving energy, there's a lot more energy to be saved by putting in heat exchange, air-to-air heat exchangers that has nothing to do with electricity or how you generate the heat. It all has to do about heat exchanging, keeping the air fresh but transferring the heat. And this doesn't address it, and nothing addresses it to my understanding. And I think that that's a fault. I do support this. Oh, the other thing is that on page 104, under questions from the committee, third paragraph, where there's a threshold, a member asked whether there's a threshold where a non-covered renovation would become covered by this as new construction. The sustainability director said pretty much short of building a building new house, it would not be new construction, but it would be a judgment of the building commissioner. If a judgment is required rather than a determination, that is an ambiguity, and I think that that is a weakness of the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Evans.
Thank you. You'll be glad to know that I don't have any questions, so I'll go right into the debate. Two things I'd like to talk about. One is that I was on the Kennedy Building Committee, and we were greatly disappointed by not being able to get LEED Silver certification. So that would have been an additional 1% savings. It turned out that it was not cost effective in doing that. And I know the sustainability director regretted having been unable to do it due to the timing. 5 years ago, they developed these plans, and they come to fruition when Kennedy was built. The other item concerns residential buildings. And I think we need to draw a distinction between what's required and what's incented. Right? What's required is in this specialized code, which does not apply to existing items. What's incented is that a residential customer can retrofit a new system that's highly fuel efficient, for example, a heat pump, and that, with the incentives, is roughly the same as a high efficiency natural gas heating system. So I just wanted to make those 2 points, and I will definitely support this.
Member Vickers, in the rear of the hall.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Brinley Vickers, Precinct 8. Through you, Mr. Moderator, I'd like to get the chance. I listened to the presentation in front of the school committee, and I do believe there's an opportunity for us to do better if we've approved this with our memorial application. And I'd love for there to be an explanation of that.
That was a question?
It was. I think she probably understood it.
Did you get the question?
I think so, and I think I would defer that to Ms. Jillian Wilson-Martin.
Jillian?
Hi, Jillian Wilson-Martin, Sustainability Director. So if I understood your question correctly, you're asking about additional incentives for through the MSBA for new construction projects. That's correct. So schools that build to meet this new specialized code standard actually qualify for an additional funding through MSBA that you would be ineligible for. So to a point earlier, there is additional funding to support new construction of schools in this manner. And in the school committee process for getting their support, we actually spoke with the town of Lexington, who is working on a new construction of a high school, and their analysis shows that they expect to actually make money instead of having additional costs to adopt this type of code. Thank you.
To continue?
Thank you. I don't have any further questions. Straight to debate. I listened to the presentation in front of FinCom. I listened to the presentation in front of the Select Board, and I listened to the presentation in front of the school committee, in addition to joining the public outreach that you all did for this. I thoroughly support this. They've done a wonderful job of answering all of the questions through all of those. I think this is a very good thing for our town, and I hope everyone votes yes. Thank you.
Would you pass the microphone to Member Gorseth? Oh, back up the stairs. There you go.
Thank you. Elise Gorseth, Precinct 4 and a member of the school committee. So I was fortunate enough to listen to the presentation given by the Lexington Select Board, and I was really impressed by the opportunities that the specialized code offers us when choosing to build new school buildings. In addition to the increased financing, there's just so much flexibility in terms of the types of energy you can use, the future proofing to do different things at different stages of the building lives. And they had even done some modeling of their energy costs over the next 20 years and showed that they were going to be able to save millions of dollars in energy costs by projecting the cost of fossil fuels versus the cost of electricity using their heat pumps. So I just think that this offers us so much flexibility that we would be foolish not to adopt it.
Could you pass the microphone to woman standing there with their hand up?
Thanks. Amanda Formica, Precinct 2. Question about how much additional funding would Natick be eligible for as part of the Climate Leaders program that you talked about?
To the member's question?
I'll defer that to Ms. Jillian Wilson-Martin, Sustainability Director.
Jillian?
Thank you. We can't say with certainty how much funding would be available to our community, but Natick is currently capped at applying for only $100,000 a year through the Green Communities Program. Previously, we were able to apply for $300,000 a year, but because we've hit some thresholds and really taking advantage of that program, we're no longer eligible. The Department of Energy Resources is set to make announcements about what the amount of funding would be. They've stated without final commitment that they do expect the cap at a minimum would be raised, and they do have additional funding sources for communities that are climate leaders, so there would be further pools of funding available to Natick if we adopt the code.
Debate?
In debate, I think I wanted to thank the Net Zero Committee for a great public forum that they organized recently. I really appreciated all of the answers to the questions that town meeting members and members of the public had. And I, like other speakers, I think that this is a great way to help leverage more funding for the town of Natick and help reduce operating costs in the long term for homeowners and help us meet our climate commitments that we've already made as a community. So I'll definitely be supporting it and encourage others too.
Member Griesmer.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Paul Griesmer, Precinct 7. I have I think it's just a technical question on the wording. I think the screen matches the book, but if we could see section 1 for a second on the screen. So under definitions, we have a definition there in bold, specialized energy code. And down in the third line of that, it refers to the stretch energy code. Then down at the bottom, we have the stretch energy code. When we go over to section 2, purpose, if we could see that, we see the language that says the purpose of 225 CMR 22.00 and 23.00 and appendices, whatever, also referred to as the specialized energy code. But down in the bottom in section 4, we just refer to something called the specialized code. Is that supposed to be the specialized energy code in section 4? And not only in the title, but in the first line? And also in the last sentence where the specialized code is enforceable by the building inspector? We have a definition of a stretch energy code, a specialized energy code, but we use a different term called specialized code.
Ms. North, is this a motion that was provided by the state?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Moderator. The
And
language was provided by the state, and we were directed to utilize the state's language.
So are we confident that we have copied what the state required us to put as a motion?
Yes, we reviewed it with the state. After we identified those two typos, which were the result of a copy and paste that included a footnote that copied as a number, we re-reviewed it with the state, and they looked at it and they confirmed that this is correct.
So that begs the question, what's the difference, right?
But I thought that this was just a technical editorial fix, but if this is the way they want it, it's dictated by the state, but it's obviously like inconsistent as to the wording. But hey, if this is what they want, this is what they get. I just don't want somebody to be able to sue and get out from under this and say the only thing the building inspector can enforce is the specialized code, and you don't have one of those. You've got a specialized energy code. So, but if this is what the state wants, they wrote it, but they should hire a proofreader.
Don't even go there. Yes, Mr. Alderson.
Jeff Alderson, Precinct 9. Mr. Moderator, I respectfully request remove the question.
The hands that I saw, were you seeking the floor? Yes. Okay, then we do need to vote that. It was seconded by Ms. Gloff. Was that you, Carol? Yes. Okay. So we have the motion to close debate. Requires a 2/3 vote. We'll vote on that at this time. Please vote. Nope. It's a majority vote. This is the 2/3. Yeah, oh, I thought you were talking about the article. Okay. I did actually bring up that song, on my phone. I was going to play it. The tally of the vote to close debate is 103 yes, 9 no, 1 abstain. Passes by a 2/3 vote. So we now have the motion before you, which was printed, it is printed, on page 102 and 103 of the Finance Committee recommendation book with the two Scribner's errors or changes that we made. And that does require a majority vote, and we'll vote on that at this time. Please vote. Voting is closed. Tally of the vote is 102 yes, 11 no, 3 abstain. We're going to run through this. Can we scroll through this so that everybody can make certain that their device is activating correctly? You have a problem with your Mr. Colburn?
Yeah, I voted yes, but it recorded as a no. I don't know how. Or I thought I voted yes.
Precinct 4, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Colburn, Precinct 4. He said his vote should be yes. Can you make note of it there or no? You can't. Okay, so the tally of the vote will be 103. I have to declare the vote. 10 and 3. 10 no and 3 abstain, with Mr. Colburn vote being a yay or yes. Anyone else? Could you rise, please? So maybe the page could get to you.
Edward Devereaux, Precinct 8. Just a point of order. The book says 2/3 majority. Not that it makes any difference.
It's a majority. That's in error.
Thank you.
Yep. We all set? Nobody else looking for the floor. Next order of business is Article 28. Article 28 is a question with regards to paid family medical leave for Natick, town of Natick employees. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
Mr. Moderator, town meeting members, the Finance Committee recommends referral to sponsor on the subject matter of Article 28 as printed on page 176 of the Finance Committee recommendation book, and I so move.
Second.
I'm not going to accept the referral as yet. I know of a positive main motion. Kat Monahan? Yeah, you want to make it from there?
Yeah, Kat Monahan, Precinct 3. I would like to move as printed on page 176 in the book. The motion as printed. Move that pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Part 1, Title 1, Chapter 4, Section 4, and Massachusetts General Law, Part 1, Title 12, Chapter 175M, Section 10, the town accept the following Massachusetts General Laws pertaining to paid family medical leave. Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 175M.
And you're Amanda? Okay. Amanda Formica seconds it. So it's moved and seconded. Mr. Jacobs, you still want to make your motion? Now would be the time to do it.
Sure. So the Finance Committee recommends referral to sponsor on the subject matter of Article 28 as printed on page 176 of the Finance Committee recommendation book, and I so move.
Second.
Motion to refer is made by Mr. Jacobs, seconded by Mr. Gillenwater. So we have the two motions on the floor. and we'll do them concurrently. Ms. Moynihan, you have the floor.
Yeah, could you pull up the slides that I provided? So yeah, this is in page 176 of your book if you want to like follow along, but we've got slides. My name's Kat Monahan. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 3. I'm your neighbor. I'm a paid family medical leave administrator for my employer. Paid family medical leave, can we go to the second slide? PFML is a fund of pooled employee and employer contributions that has been available to workers in Massachusetts in the private sector and also state employees since 2021. When the law was passed, it exempted municipal employers, and as a result, 200,000 people in our Commonwealth, including 2,000 people that work for the town of Natick and Natick Public Schools, are not able to apply for this benefit when they need it to do any of the things in that chart. This is from the Department of Family Medical Leave's annual report for FY23. So about half of all claims are for the worker's own serious health condition. You can see about a quarter of them are for child bonding. Pregnancy and maternity is 13%, and then caring for a family member with a serious health condition is 10%. And it also has provisions for if a family member is deployed and you need to take care of your household, or if you're caring for an injured service member. Let's go to the next slide. Who is impacted by Article 28? Directly, everyone that works for the town of Natick. That includes part-time and full-time employees, people that work under a collective bargaining agreement, or people that, you know, are just seasonal Parks and Rec employees. And none of these employees currently have access to paid family and medical leave, except for the Teachers Unit A, which is our largest union in the town by headcount and payroll dollars. They have 5 days of parental leave. 5. They also have 5 days of critical care leave if they have to care for a family member. But other than that, if you work for the town of Natick or any municipality, like, use your sick and vacation time or go unpaid. So it's a really desperate situation for people in any of those categories that we looked at on the previous slide. As I mentioned, every private sector worker has had this since 2021, and we really need, as one of the largest employers in the town of Natick, we need to catch up, because we are missing out on retaining quality employees or attracting quality employees that might leave a job working for the state or working for a private employer. Yeah. And I want to state, we'll get into costs later, but the annual withholding for an employee is generally less than the annual premium for a short-term disability policy. So it's a more comprehensive benefit at a better cost. Next slide, please. One before this. Yeah. Why should we do this? Why should town meeting do this tonight? As I mentioned, this is catching up to the private sector. It's been proven in other state paid leave programs that retention improves without wage costs going up significantly. It improves the health outcomes for all members of a family. It can preclude the demand for such benefits in strike action. There are other communities that have bargaining units that ask for 60 days of paid parental leave, and after negotiation, and that might be 40 days after negotiation, the municipality has to pay that benefit when it's taken. When we use the paid family medical leave program that the state provides, the benefits, if an employee applies and are approved, are paid from the state fund. The town of Natick is not responsible for paying the benefit while the employee is on leave. We're only responsible for the PFML liability that we'll get to in a later slide. And then to offset some of the liability, some reimbursement funds would be available for existing paid leave that qualifies under PFML right now. So the 5, oh, you went ahead, but that's okay. We can look at that. The 5 days of teacher parental leave, the 5 days of administrative critical care leave, and sick bank pay could be reimbursed under the PFML program because that's already an option for private employers that have qualifying leaves of this type. Some of the positive health impacts. Again, this is why we need to do this now. Yeah, thank you, perfect. When you have paid leave and you can take 12 weeks to care for a newborn, you're more likely to get that newborn to all of their newborn appointments. You're more likely to recover from birth or just bringing a new baby into your house successfully if you have 12 weeks and if you are able to feed your family during those 12 weeks and stay in your home. But there's research to back it up if you don't just take that at face value. I really want Natick to achieve its goal of being an attractive, innovative place to work, and I don't see how that can happen if we don't give this benefit to our employees or give them access to this benefit, because again, we're just allowing them access to the pool created by the state, and the state will review, approve, and administer any benefits. Let's go to the next slide. How much does it cost? It is a 0.88% liability on taxable wages. That's Social Security taxable wages, so the employees that are lucky enough to make over $168,000 a year will have their PFML liability capped. For a typical employee making $75,000 a year, they would contribute $345 annually to paid family medical leave. And the employer contribution is 0.42% if you look at this breakdown. So the minimum the town would have to contribute is $442,697, give or take, annually. And if we could go to the next slide, where would PFML liability live within our budget? It would be a shared employee benefit expense. So, you know, if you look at this, this is the current other employee benefits. Just in the last year, the town has had to find the resources for $2.6 million in healthcare premium increases. So I think when we look at PFML in relation to that, or in relation to our Medicare liability, which is fixed at 1.45% of taxable wages, this is something that we'll be able to manage, and it's not prohibitively expensive. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. These are some hypotheticals of who, based on, you know, positions and pay scales in town and current leave offerings, like who would use this kind of a leave? We don't need to linger on them. Let's go to the summary slide. That's, I think, 2 later, slide number 10. So this is a comparison of those 4 examples showing kind of what do people in these types of position have access to now. How many weeks would they have to go unpaid without PFML? And if they were eligible for PFML, what kind of money could they bring home to take care of their families during these times? So when you see that it is as impactful for these people as, you know, $8,400, $11,000 during a time when they're recovering from surgery or taking care of a newborn, it's really important. Let's go to slide 11. How would Natick implement paid family medical leave? There's a process outlined by the state. The motion that I read is very directly from the paid family medical leave law. It's how we're supposed to do this as a municipality because we are the legislative body of the town of Natick. And then after we vote, it gets certified. The Department of Family Medical Leave accepts that we turn on the tax liability in our existing state Department of Revenue account. And the town will assign a PFML administrator. This is a lot like the unemployment portal for employers. The they're logging in, they're seeing that someone has applied, they're confirming, yes, this person is an employee, the information they've entered is accurate, and they don't do much else. The state does the rest of the review, they decide the benefit amount, they pay the benefit amount, and they make the employer aware, but it's not something that Natick, they can't deny on behalf of the state, one of these applications. How does this work for our CBAs? So, yeah, the town would have to incorporate it into the collective bargaining agreements, but as we learned, they're all over the map with when they expire, and that's by design. We don't want them all to expire on the same day. That sounds like a nightmare. So yeah, they would have to incorporate that into the collective bargaining agreements, the select board for the ones that they're negotiating, the school committee for theirs, after we vote. You can't get the CBAs, you can't get them to agree to a benefit the town meeting hasn't approved. And the legislature of the town needs to make this decision and accept this law before we bring it to them. I was really encouraged to hear in the school committee update last night from the teachers union that they sent out a survey to their members. I mentioned that there's about 600 of them, and about 1/3 of them responded to the survey, and it was just a one-question survey. How do you feel about PFML? Accept it now. I don't know enough. I don't want this. 50% of them said do it now. Like, they know that this is a cost-effective, equitable, and fair way to do this and get it for the employees of the town in 2025. Yeah, let's go to the last slide. I've said it all. I really think that this is the right answer to solve this crisis of paid family medical leave for the workers of this town, and I don't think that anyone else but town meeting is supposed to make this decision, because the Mass General Law is written that the legislator has to do it. So I'm asking us as the legislators of Natick to do this. When it was referred in October, the other referral parties did not show a motivation or an action to take action on this because town meeting didn't make them do it. And I don't think that referring this will get these benefits for these employees in 2025 or 2026 or any time, because they need to be pushed into making this decision. And I don't think that the people that work for the town of Natick should have to wait when we know that the right decision is right here, and it's been working for the people of Massachusetts since 2021. And honestly, I hope that my contribution from my own paycheck can go to benefit people like the teachers at my kids' school. I hope that they get that opportunity to take that leave that they need, or the people, working for the Parks Department or any department in the town of Natick, because I want all of them to have access to this benefit, no matter what they're paid, no matter who they're represented by, and whether they're hourly, salary, part-time, I don't care. We supported paid family medical leave as a state because it's the right thing to do, and excluding this class of people is doing them a disservice. I'm all done, but I'd love to stay up for questions and debate.
Very good. The select board wants to present?
No, Catherine Coughlin.
So you're speaking on behalf of your constituents, yes. Your town meeting constituents. Well, what I want to do is that there was also a memorandum that was put out by the town administrator. And I want, since that was there, I think a fair explanation of that memorandum should be imparted to the town meeting members also, because they may not all have that right now.
Understood. There are copies out on the table, just for the record. Jamie Erickson, Town Administrator. This memorandum dated March 28th, 2024 was provided to the Finance Committee as well. So it is part of the public record and has been part of the public record since that time. It also includes a copy of the memorandum that was provided to the Finance Committee and Town Meeting on September 6, 2023. Basically, in brief, since the referral vote in September 2023, Town Administration has been doing its due diligence to try to analyze this, understand where there are opportunities for us to incorporate comparable policies or adjustments to what we currently offer, and understand just the overall process moving forward. More related to comparing what we offer already as employers to our employees, and also just understanding the actual cost of the town. A few things to note. From a budgeting perspective, the cost of the town for FY25 would, in my opinion, would have to be fully incorporated. The ratios of pay actually has to be negotiated with the collective bargaining agreements. We'd have to impact bargain this with all 15/16 collective bargaining units. And if this were to be something adopted tonight by town meeting, I would have to, from a budgeting perspective, assume that the entire cost would be borne by the town, which would be about $800 to $1 million for FY25. That's currently not in the FY25 budget. So one thing that I would ask town meeting to expect is that we'd have to come back to you with updated budget figures for FY25 because we have not incorporated this cost into the budget. Another few things to note that are outlined in the memo, and that point is outlined in the memo, is the fact that we are doing some research with our collective bargaining units. We have done a survey as well during the open enrollment period. It's still open until, I believe, the end of this week. That we're doing a survey work with all town staff, not just school department staff. And we do have a number of responses already. I don't want to say the results yet because it's still open and I don't want to skew the results of that survey, but our intent was to utilize the open enrollment period, which is a time when our HR team engages with all town staff, including school department staff, and use that as an opportunity to gauge interest not only on the program, but also willingness to pay for the program, and if so, to what level, along with all of our benefit programs. We're currently in the midst of doing that so that we can better understand the demand for this from town staff. One thing to note is that we have 15 to 16 different collective bargaining units, each one's with their own criteria and benefit outlines for sick time. And yes, we call it sick time, but it really, in some respects, could be called paid family medical leave time. So, for example, sick time for a non-union personnel member can be used for parental leave and is actually designed to be used for parental leave or to take care of a family member as well as an individual is sick. It's a full pay benefit, and there may be differences between the town's current offering and the PFMLA program offering, but that's what we want to understand. How can we, through policy changes or just through adjustments of our current offerings, get close or if not better than the current PFMLA program? And we might even find that in many cases our benefits are already more lucrative than the PFMLA program. Maybe not across the board, but in some cases it might be. I, for example, have used my sick time to take care of a sick family member recently for the month of December, actually, and I found that that benefit was a huge benefit that the town is offering through our existing program, where I was able to utilize sick time to take care of a family member because of our existing policies and our existing programs. It was a very beneficial program for me, and so I do have some personal knowledge of how we currently use some of our benefits as well. I also have 3 kids, so I've used paid sick time in the past for parental leave as well in a municipal setting. It's not to say that we shouldn't at least explore looking at PFMLA, but the point of my memo is more to say that we are exploring how our current benefit offerings compare to PFMLA, what we can do in the coming year or year plus, because it might take us a little while to work with the different collective bargaining units to work through updating some of the policies and programs in the coming years to get us closer to, if not more beneficial than the PFMLA program, and or create a program that is right for Natick, if we find that there's a program that's right for Natick. A big question is also just really going to be just in regards to how this works in the coming year, in the sense that at least on the town side, we have 5 collective bargaining agreements that are expiring next fiscal year. I believe on the school side, almost all of their collective bargaining units are expiring next fiscal year. So it's an opportunity for us to use this next fiscal year to also explore with those collective bargaining units the interest in this level of type of benefit, because there are ways that we might be able to just augment our current offerings to provide similar, if not better, benefits, in my opinion. Happy to answer any questions, but that was the gist of the memo that I had. And I did have a recommendation in the memo that, just given some of these details, town administration at this time does not recommend adopting PFMLA. Doesn't mean in the future we might not come back and ask, but at this time we're not recommending adoption because we do want more time to study this and better understand where can we augment some of our current offerings to get to really address some of the needs that this might provide that we might not be providing today. At the same time, I do feel that our current offerings offer many of the beneficial programs and benefits that PFMLA does offer to our town employees. Thank you very much.
Member Coughlin.
Catherine Coughlin, Precinct 2 and the Select Board, speaking as a representative for Precinct 2. There were a lot of questions that came, first questions, sorry, Mr. Moderator, I have a couple of questions through you. I'd like to ask town administration, or to whom you direct the question, and the school administrator, superintendent, has this benefit come up in recruitment on the town side or the school side, or in exit interviews?
To the member's question, we'll start with the administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. A paid family medical leave benefit like this has, on the town side anyway, has not come up in recruitment discussions with either employees that have taken the job or have chosen not to take the job. It just has not been an item that has come up as a factor.
Thank you. Superintendent?
Thank you. Generally in recruitment, question will come about existing benefits, but this has not come up specifically in recruitment.
Thank you. Ms. Coughlin.
Second question, if this is approved tonight, it's my understanding that all 15 or 16 bargaining units in the town will be opened automatically for impact bargaining, and until such time as those bargaining negotiations have been closed, the town would be responsible for both parts, so that would be about $880,000. So my question is, could you remind us what the free cash was in the approved budget for fiscal year 25?
Deputy Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Townsend, Deputy Town Administrator and Director of Finance. Your free cash reserve currently is $707,161. You do recall you have spent some of that already, $126,184 with regards to the CBA funding, and an additional $75,000 for the Charter and Bylaws Review Committee.
Thank you, sir. To continue, Ms. Coughlin.
I'd like to start by saying that I agree with the sponsor of this article that it is critical and important that every member or every employee, whether they're protected by a bargaining agreement or not, be able to avail themselves of 12 weeks of paid family medical leave. So the question is, how do we pay for it? The devil's in the details. Now, if we approve this tonight, what we're giving to 15 unions is a benefit that they didn't have to negotiate or deal with a quid pro quo, for example. If we do this tonight, we put a permanent liability on our books that we can't easily undo if this is not the best way to meet this budget or this goal. Now, when this was first raised, one of my questions was, what do the more progressive towns that outpace us terribly on progressive issues, what do they do? So I contacted the chief people officer in Cambridge, Rasia Catchings, and asked why Cambridge had not accepted or adopted this. And she explained it's much less expensive for us to just give the time at 100% to those who need it than to pay a tiny little bit on an entire city's budget or payroll budget over time to get reimbursed $20,000 here, $40,000 here, $50,000. Now this does two things. It makes sure that, so in Cambridge, on the school side, the district pays 40 days after 26 days are used. So there's your 12 weeks. They get this at 100%. Why is that important on the school side? Because if you're paid at 70% and you're not on payroll, you're being paid by the state, that time spent out of off the town's payroll does not count towards the time needed to accrue for retirement. This came up in an interview or a question I had with 3 union representatives from the schools today. I was unable to make the meeting. I was traveling last night. I asked 50% of their respondents, of a third of their members, said this is something we want. 30 said they wanted more info, which I thought was interesting. 7% had no opinion, 12% opposed. So my question was, why would you oppose it? Now, if you're a senior teacher and you're looking at 5 years down the road, you've got banked sick time, you don't want any part of this because you don't want to lose time towards your progress. But what they can do is give time to the emergency sick bank. So I spoke with someone today who had given, I think, 3 weeks or 4 weeks of his time so that junior teachers who don't have that time to give can take that time. So what happens if we have the data that I want in order to make a positive decision on this is data we haven't had time to gather. So for example, over the last 3 years, how many town employees and how many school employees have needed 12 weeks, and what has it cost them in terms of actual dollars? If we adopt this, this is an unfunded liability, this is a funded liability because we have to put it on our budget, but it's in perpetuity until we somehow undo it and do something else. I talked to union representatives in a number of different towns, specifically on the school side, because on the town side, much smaller part of our payroll budget, on the town side, town employees can use their sick time for family, for pregnancy, for taking care of a family member. One disagreement I have with that is it kind of implies that pregnancy is an illness, and I vehemently disagree with that. But the cost of that semantics is really high if we indulge in talking about that. What if we did this? What if we figured out what it would actually cost to fully fund teachers who need this benefit and have them bargain for it, and town employees, what would it really cost in dollars, as opposed to putting an $800,080 liability on our books? Now, of the 67 school contracts that have been negotiated for fiscal 23 to 26, at least a dozen have not even addressed parent or family leave. And the reason for that was, in that community, what was more important to them was another bargaining issue. So Nantucket said, we're not interested in leave. What we want is a 15.25% COLA increase in year 1. And they got that. North Andover negotiated a 12.5% COLA. Worcester, 11%. Plymouth, 10%. Other communities have said what we need is leave. They analyzed the situation, they talked to the unions, they spent time on this. And for example, I mentioned Cambridge. Andover has 40 days paid by the district, 20 sick days. And this is for actual time out of the office, or out of the school, or out of the school. Newton has 20 days paid by the district. Sharon has 20 days paid by the district. Lexington has 20 days. Most of these come up with that 12 weeks without having to put a liability in our books that we're not going to be able to take off. There were a couple of other quick points I'd make. As a matter of equity, my personal opinion is that I've been talking about collective bargaining agreements. I want to talk about the people who don't have that protection. Part-time employees, people who are not represented by a union. I think they should get the same benefits that people who are represented by somebody and who can argue for them. I'd like the town to look at that and figure out what is it that we can do to make sure that these people are also protected. Because it's those people who most need this benefit. It's the people who live paycheck to paycheck, and getting paid 70% of their check might not be enough. if we can give them 100%. Now, it sounds like I'm standing up here talking to the union reps today. He said, okay, so none of them are town meeting members, but one of them is a town resident. And he said, so if we say to you, we don't want you to argue for this, we don't want you to support this, what happens when we come around to the bargaining table and we can't get this? And I said, you need better negotiators, because other towns have done it. So let's figure out a way, town and school, to come together, get these hard data questions. What would it actually cost us in dollars to pay 100%? In other words, if a DPW truck driver takes time off for parental leave, and we don't necessarily, maybe we need a substitute driver, maybe we don't, but we're paying that benefit, they get 100% of it. Talk about great retention. It's not 70%. And that is just leave on our books. It's not even in the budget. On the school side, there may be a question of a substitute, or with the case of a physics teacher that I talked to today. He said, you can't just call a physics student in to teach at a high school.
Ms. Coughlin?
Yes.
You've exhausted your 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Margaret.
Would you please conclude your remarks?
That's all I have to say. So I will be voting against this. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Mr. Alderman, gentleman standing up.
Thank you, Jeff Alderson, Precinct 9. Question, Mr. Moderator. In the sponsor's presentation, it was mentioned that there is an existing crisis in the town of Natick that this policy and adoption would solve. Could we get some clarification in terms of data, anecdote, survey, other information in support of that claim?
You're asking what the crisis is and
Yes,
what's
sir.
the supporting data?
Yes, sir.
To the members' questions, plural.
I'll answer them. I also have debate for after that.
What is critical and what is the data?
Sure. Anecdata. Employees have told me I can't afford to keep working here after I give birth. Employees have told me I wish I had this when I was caring for my husband last year because I burned through 2 decades of sick time in a summer. I talked to people who had to take unpaid leave during their pregnancy, even though they were teachers, even though they didn't want to, even though they would have loved to qualify for their pension credit, but they just didn't have the time. Yeah. And I think as a looming crisis, we're seeing more and more towns, while they haven't necessarily bargained for it yet, there are 5,000 teachers representing 11 communities on the North Shore who are organizing for this and doing standouts every week for the same benefits that PFML can provide. So I think that it's a growing problem that's not going to diminish over the months and years.
I think that she's answered your question.
Yes,
To continue, sir?
Another question. If approved at town meeting tonight, what is the earliest date that a town employee would be able to begin to use this benefit? And I understand there might be some CBA requirement. Assuming all the stars align, what's the earliest date people could use this benefit?
To the member's question.
A vote tonight creates a tax liability for the next quarter, which means July, August, September 2024. And then after the town has submitted the liability payment for 2 quarters, so in the 3rd quarter of our entrance into the program, employees can apply for the benefit. So I will say January of 2025.
Thank you. No further questions.
Can I add?
Member Sullivan.
Oh, okay.
Question through Dan Sullivan, Precinct 8. Question through you, Mr. Moderator. In the presentation earlier, we saw that the net impact to the budget was about 0.88%. I just wanted to ask the question, was there any calculation given to the cost associated with backfilling positions for individuals that may be on leave, be it for overtime or substitute teachers?
I don't know who constructed that amount. Who worked up the numbers? Was it UCAT or was
All
it
of my numbers
the town?
are only pertaining to the PFML liability, which is a calculation of payroll dollars. The
Okay.
other members mentioned replacing another employee. I didn't do any of those.
Okay.
That's not mine.
All right.
Another question. It was explained that Natick was at a competitive disadvantaged for not having this. Are there any other communities in the Commonwealth, either regionally or across the board, that have adopted this statute for their and implemented it for their town that we may be at a competitive disadvantage against?
No. Oh, sorry.
I did have a third question. My third question is for anyone on the town side, either municipal or school, that has participated in recently negotiated collective bargaining agreements, could they give us any context as to where in that union's list of demands or opening asks in the negotiations, was PMFL and MFL part of that? And if so, where did it rank in their list of requests or demands?
Where would one find the request?
No, the question was for...
Yeah, I got the first part of it.
Okay.
I didn't, you ran off and I didn't hear the end of it.
Has PFML been an issue that has been requested?
I got that, okay. And then you ran off with something and I couldn't understand what that was.
And if so, where did it rank in the lists of requests?
Okay.
So generally in a collective bargaining...
To the member's question, Mr. Erickson?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So as this this body knows, we've settled 3 of 5 contracts that are due to expire this year on the town side. And we are in active negotiations with the other 2. So we've been actively working with 5 collective bargaining units. In all cases thus far, PFMLA has not come up from the union. We, town administration, have asked about it at the table, not as a bargaining item, but we have asked about it. And by and large, the response has been, we need to learn more about that. We don't know what that is. And we've been working to educate.
Thank you.
Do you wish to debate? You have the floor, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. In debate, I would support referral. In the presentation this evening, we did not get a calculation of the costs associated with backfilling individuals that are out on leave. That would add some additional costs, which I think should be studied. I believe it was inferred in the earlier presentation that during the referral process that there's been no work or there's been no impetus by anyone to put any effort into it, but based on the memorandum that was read by the town administrator, or I don't know, when's that town manager, I don't know, that it definitely seems like there's been some fairly substantial work done on this, and maybe the months over the winter between fall town meeting and spring wasn't enough time to get something as significant as this addressed. But for all of those purposes, it definitely seems like this is a topic that's raised the attention of the community. There's some work being done on it, and I think we as a body need more information on the various options that may be available to make an appropriate and informed decision. Thank you.
Gentleman in the red T-shirt, were you seeking the floor? Thought so.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Casey Galligan, Precinct 3. Just a question. So there are 2 figures that I'm seeing. I'm seeing Ms. Monahan's figure of $400 and some odd $1,000. I'm seeing the town administrator's figure of about $800,000 plus or minus. Those are very different figures. And I'm just wondering if somebody can speak to why such a difference.
Do you want to start? Okay, Ken.
Yeah, I mean, it's the total liability is the opening scenario with a $927,556. Until the town starts implementing the withholding, that's something they could do on non-represented employees immediately. That's something they work out with collective bargaining employees over time. Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's a combination of the 2.
Yep. Sure. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. And I'm not debating the numbers. These are numbers from our payroll. So that's why I said it's about $850,000 to $1 million, depending on the final payroll numbers. Ultimately, the cost to the employer versus the employee needs to be negotiated. So there's a ratio that needs to be negotiated. It can be 100% on the employer. And for budgeting purposes, I would have to assume that we're going to pick up 100% of the cost because we have not negotiated this with any of the collective bargaining units. And if town meeting acts on this tonight, it's now a required benefit for all town employees no matter what, which means if I don't want to speak to collective bargaining, but if we go to the table.
Okay, yeah, you don't want to go any further.
So that's why my number is that.
To continue, sir?
Thank you, and that's my fault too. I'm sorry I didn't combine those two numbers, Ms. Monahan, so pardon me on that one. The second question is, in hearing the town administrator speak about it, it seemed like a little bit of deja vu from the fall. I feel like I was hearing the same thing from the fall, and that you might want to take a look into it. And so I'm just wondering how much you've looked into it over the last 6 months since the last time.
To the member's question.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So a good chunk of what we've been doing is analyzing what other communities have done, how the impact compares to, meaning what is the financial impact, but other the impacts as well as it compares to just other town employees. We've been trying to also understand how best to engage with employees to understand the demand. That's why we targeted the open enrollment period this May, which is due to close again. The open enrollment period ends this week, and we were deliberately targeting that because it's the time when we can engage with all town employees. In past referral instances, we've had more than just the time between two town meetings to do the work because it takes longer. One thing to note about the Springtown meeting preparation work is that in order for me to take the staff time off of other work for budgeting purposes, that would be put towards this. There's a balance there. So it can take a little bit of time between the fall and the spring to do the significant diving into the data numbers, but we have started doing that work between our HR departments, working with school department personnel to understand where they are in their process of analyzing this, as well as the finance team to look at what they're doing. But we have been doing some work behind the scenes just to prep for really a data-driven process and moving forward.
To continue?
Thank you for the information, nothing else.
Mr. Coffey.
David Coffey, Precinct 2, through you, would it be financially prudent to totally wipe out our free cash reserves for the town to pay for the first year's liability, and would that affect our bond rating?
To the members' questions. Prudence, and what's the effect on the bond rating?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would argue, in my opinion, that it is not financially prudent to wipe out our free cash reserves. I cannot speak to how it would impact our bond rating at this time. It probably would not have a material impact at this time on our bond rating, but that is just anecdotal. We'd have to talk to the bond rating agencies to see if there's any impact there.
To continue?
Through you, given that the total liability would be greater than what's in free cash, where would the town anticipate cutting money from the budget to pay for the first year's liability?
To the member's question.
That is why at the beginning of this debate, if this passes tonight, I'll have to ask for town meeting to likely hear an updated budget presentation, because we'd have to work with the administrations to figure out where that money would be coming from.
Thank you. In debate, I would ask the members to vote in favor of the referral. What I've heard so far tonight is the employees who would be affected by this don't seem to want it. To say that 1/3 of the members of the teachers union responded and only 50% of that 1/3 said they might be interested in it is hardly a landslide vote in favor. So I'd suggest that right now there's nothing before us that tells us the employees want this. The town can't afford it, so on one side you've got employees who don't want it, and on the other side you've got the town that can't pay for it. So given that reality, I would ask that we refer this. We cannot simply throw something into the budget which we can't afford. We are limited in what we have, and we can't keep going back to the taxpayer saying, well, we need more money, we need more money, we need more money for something we don't want in the first place, that the employees don't want. So please vote for referral, and I hope we can move this along tonight. Thank you.
Pass the microphone forward to Mr. Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jim Williamson, Precinct 9. Our budgets are tight every single year. We depend on the Finance Committee and the town administration to advise us whether something is appropriate or not. In this case, there's no positive motion from the Finance Committee, and the town administrator has asked us not to pass it as well. Personally, I think we have to depend on those people to advise us on what's appropriate, and it's not my intention to vote against their positions at this point, and therefore I will vote for referral.
Down here with the multicolored jacket.
Victoria Grafflin, Precinct 5. I have a couple of questions. So I thought I heard the town administrator say that some of the union contracts currently provide for more generous benefits than PFML would provide. Is that correct? Did I hear that correctly?
To the member's question.
I believe I noted that union contracts do provide for various sick time benefits, and in some cases they may be more beneficial. We'd have to analyze that as compared to the whole spectrum of PFMLA benefits. One thing to note is that the sick leave or I would argue some of our sick leave benefits can be used for comparable benefits, meaning paternity, maternity leave, caring for a sick child or parent or relative. In our union contracts, as well as for non-union personnel, are full pay benefits, for example, and a PFMLA is a part pay benefit with a cap. So those are some of the distinctions and some of the items that we are going to be that we have been looking at to figure out where is the distinction between our current benefits and the PFMLA benefit.
I have two other questions.
To continue?
So I thought speaking to that partial pay benefit, it sounded like, or it looked like the memo referenced an up to 80% of weekly pay under PFML. And then the speaker, I'm sorry, I forget her name, from the select board was quoting 70%. I'm just wondering if anyone could clarify whether it's 80 or 70% or how that's determined.
Ms. Monahan.
There's a state calculator that when you're applying, you input your weekly wage, or actually like your wages from the last 4 quarters, and they compare that to the state average weekly wage. And so the benefit amount is determined by, your place within that scale, and there's a maximum weekly benefit of $1,149.90. So that would be the absolute max. That might be 70% for some, 80% for others, but yeah.
To continue.
So the last question I have, and then I did want to make a comment for debate, if I may, Mr. Moderator. Last question I have is it possible that collective bargaining agreements that may be negotiated in the future would end up costing the town more than what the PFML benefit would?
To the member's question.
I'm not sure I can answer that question because we'd have to know what the details are of those negotiated benefits.
In debate.
Fair enough. So I guess in debate what I wanted to say is that right now 12 states have PFML as a statewide benefit, which is pretty new, very new. It's kind of a game changer for private sector employees who have never had a paid family leave benefit. But I do feel like I would, if the town meeting considers this, and I'm not sure that right now is the time to approve it, I would like to see that there's equity across departments. And so I think it does bode much more data on sort of the actual costs and the relationships across the departments. And that's all I have to say. Thank you. So I won't support approving this, I guess.
Could you bring the microphone down about 3 rows to the member in white?
Hi, Kelly Quinlan, Precinct 10, first time at town meeting. Not today, but this is for my first time meeting. I just wanted to speak for debate briefly. This sort of discussion that employees don't want this feels pretty off to me. I think this is a benefit that people are looking for right now in jobs. And for some context about whether or not other places have it, we talked about, do other local municipalities have this? I'm a federal employee, and I was entitled to 12 weeks of paid leave 2 years ago. My husband is a Wells Fargo employee. He was entitled to 16 weeks paid leave 2 years ago. We were not required to touch our sick leave. The reason being, you get sick outside of this, right? Like your sick leave is a different benefit. I think just something to discuss when we're thinking about this. If you are required to use your sick leave for your parental benefits when your newborn gets sick, you don't have any leave. Just for food for thought. Thanks.
Okay, now you want to bring microphone down front, and the other page, stand up to next to that member that has a pink top on. You're next, Andy.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Andy Estruth, Precinct 5. I just have a question through you, Mr. Moderator. Just something I don't completely understand. There was reference to if this were to pass, then the town would need to negotiate or bargain, impact bargain with all the unions. But so in my view, if this were to pass, then everybody would be covered by it. So it wasn't clear to me what the necessity for the bargaining would be. If everybody has a new benefit across the board, what are we bargaining about?
To the member's question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. So it's an impact because we'd have to negotiate the percentage of who pays what. So if the town is going to take on the entire cost of the $900,000+, the impact bargaining is going to be pretty easy because the town is picking up 100% of the costs. If we are trying to get some of the costs to be paid by the employee as proposed in the presentation, that is an impact that we'd have to collectively bargain with all of the union groups and figure out how those union groups would be willing to pay for that. So it's an impact because it's an impact to their potential pay, to their potential benefits that we would have to collectively bargain with all of the collective bargaining units.
Thank you. Just one more kind of related question. So if you're not in a union, you're just automatically splitting it 50-50? Is that how that would work, the payment?
No, that would be a determination of town administration in the case of non-union personnel on the town side. I would argue that we cannot treat a certain class of employees differently from everybody else. So I would, my recommendation to the select board and to administration would be that what we collectively bargain with the unions would be the same for non-union personnel.
Thank you. That's it.
Ms. Collins, you're next.
Thank you. Kathy Collins, Precinct 9. I have a couple of questions, if I may. The first is, I believe town administration said that they were reaching out during the open enrollment period to employees. However, part-time employees don't have health insurance or many other benefits. How are we reaching out to that group?
To the member's question.
It's an excellent question. So part-time employees that work more than 20 hours a week do have access to the benefits, so therefore they would be part of the survey outreach. For those who work less than 20 hours a week, it's a very small portion of our year-round employee base. Many, at least on the town side of our part-time employees, are actually summer employees, so we can't really reach out to them right now because we don't know who they are right now. And our intent is to really activate them once we actually have them hired for the summertime help, for example, with the Rec and Parks Department, and see where that interest lies.
Thank you. Another question. Is it possible to vote to get out of this if we decide it's not working for us and we come up with something better? Or is this a permanent decision?
Interesting. Ms. North?
Under the general laws, the town would not be allowed to rescind the vote for at least 3 years. And then, depending on a variety of processes, there could be a requirement of a ballot vote. Also, rescission does not eliminate the obligation to the collective bargaining units that are currently have that obligation. So it would only impact new employees down the road, but it would not impact currently existing employees.
Thank you very much. In debate, please.
Certainly.
I have both the privilege and the responsibility for being on the negotiating team for every single school collective bargaining that was negotiated in 2022, and I will as well be in the future because every single school contract expires June 30, 2025. I can say that PFML was never raised in any of those negotiations. This is 6 different unions we work with. It was not raised. That said, we did make some changes for parental leave in the last contract to recognize spouses and adoptive parents. Was it the same? No, but it was at least a beginning, and that was really important to the unions that worked on that. There were some unions that were like, we don't care. Not our concern. This was referred to, I believe, the sponsor, the town administration, possibly the select board, and the school committee in the fall. Guess what? I didn't happen to be at that meeting, and no one told the school committee that it had been referred to us until the sponsor came before us in April. And the sponsor's been before us twice now. The school committee has created a task force to look into the details and work on the numbers and such. From my position, I think it is unconscionable. As much as at one level you can say, well, this is a great benefit, everyone deserves it. I'm not debating that. But I think that it's not in the town's best interest or the employees' best interest in the collective bargaining units to do this before discussions happen in negotiations. I believe we should refer this at this time. The school committee has made a statement and a pledge that we will continue to work on it. We will work in negotiations, and who knows, maybe it's something like the way the PEC went in, where changes were made in the contract if that went in, but if it came out, these other things took their place. That's up for negotiations. I'm also concerned that people are putting money into the state benefit and the state's determining how much, what the numbers are. I seem to recall that's how CPA worked when it first started, and everybody said, oh, look, all these communities that are in it are getting all this money. And that reimbursement rate went down and down and down and down and down, and there was nothing that cities and towns could do to change that reimbursement rate. I don't think this is ready at this point. I don't think it is good for the employees. I don't think it is good I know it's not good for the town to take on this kind of a liability, especially if we can't get out of it for 3 years, which is the typical length of our collective bargaining contracts. And even then, we may not lose some of the liability. Impact bargaining is much harder than straight negotiations to settle the contract. And I don't think that this is something we should force on our employees or any citizens to do this at this time. I'm all for people being able to take the leave they need to do it. But the fact is, in most cases, somebody needs to do that job while they're out. And that number has not been considered here. So we've got $800 to $1 million in premiums, if you will, but nowhere are we talking about the extra cost for substitutes in the school department or overtime in DPW or police or fire. We can't do without a certain number of employees working, and this doesn't account for that. We need to do more work. So I will be supporting the referral, and I would ask that each of you support the referral. Not because we're not nice people who think people should get leave, but because we need to understand all the details across the board before.
You've encroached upon your 5-minute limit.
Thank you. I'm finished, Mr. Moderator.
There's a member in a purple top. I can't remember your last name. I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Heather Psyche from Precinct 9. A question through you, Mr. Moderator. Is the Massachusetts Paid Family Medical Leave, if I got all the acronyms in there right, if Natick adopts that, would it be an all or nothing type of thing for all employees? Because we have represented employees and unions, and we have non-represented employees, and I didn't know if the people in the unions have someone to negotiate for them, could we apply this to just the people who don't have someone to apply that for them? Do you understand?
I think so. To the member's question.
All employees. What we do, this vote makes Natick as an employer subject to paid family medical leave laws. So anyone employed by them.
Thank you very much. Yep. To continue?
Well, that's unfortunate for our non-represented new people with very little time. And then I guess in debate, as a woman who's been interviewed a number of times and is aware of the fact that my potential employers can't ask me certain questions, and if there are multiple people up for the same job, I think asking if it's a recruitment issue is kind of inappropriate, because no one in their right mind is going to say, hey, I want to have a baby next year. Do you have paid family medical leave? Will you hire me and train me? That's it. Thank you.
My next name on my list is Mr. Sidney.
I'd like to debate too.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, town meeting members. Richard Sidney, Precinct 8, and a member of your select board. When the select board was discussing this, we were, I'd say, pretty universally in agreement that something like this is a good idea. However, what we were concerned about, among other things, was giving $400,000 to the employees before we can bargain for it. If we bargain for it, if we give them $400,000 and they say, well, you know, how can we get that back from you? They're going to say, you can't. Essentially, if we pass this, we're paying the full boat the entire way, basically forever. If they say, yeah, you can take it out of our paycheck, but you're going to give us something else. And generally, if they say, you're going to give us something else, that's even more expensive. So there's a way to solve this. It's not by passing this right now. Both the previous speaker and the town administration have said they need more time to study this or study something to see what's going to happen. The other thing I'd say is we do try to, as a town, for the non-union employees, we do try to match benefits. So if we bargain something to give the employees some kind of family medical leave, all of our employees are going to get it because that's just our policy. So I really strongly urge the referral tonight. You know, I would guess, and this is purely a guess, I would guess that we need another year before we can figure out what the right thing to do is. We've got to talk to all the unions, and specifically the school administration has to talk to all their unions. So please refer this. It's a great idea. It's got to be done right, or it's going to cost the town a boatload of money. Thank you very much.
Before I call on the next 4 or 5 of you, I want to ask that you become laser focused while in your debate, and also kind of remember what other people have already talked about, and let's not repeat ourselves. Next person on the list was Mr. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dirk Coburn, Precinct 4. through you to the elected and/or appointed officials who are responsible for negotiating with our unions on our behalf. I have a question. If we were to implement this, are there any unions that have indicated they will waive or forego grievance for impact bargaining?
Is that something you want to answer?
No.
Thank you. Now, I'm serious. I shouldn't put that tone into it, but I don't know if you want to answer that question. Mr. Colburn.
In debate, then. The answer is obviously no. No union would waive the opportunity to do impact bargaining because a benefit voted unilaterally that has a cost impact like this is a great boon to a negotiating unit. And it's something that does not have to be fit into standard negotiation. Impact bargaining is indeed different, and it pulls the rug out from under the people who work on our behalf. And for that reason, I think we ought to let them do what has not yet been requested with regard to the Paid Family and Medical Leave Act. And every unit has had the opportunity. This thing has been enacted before the last negotiation on every unit in the town, and it's not been requested. I think I'm delighted to hear that research has been done to discover other ways to provide this very worthy benefit that we all certainly would appreciate being able to have ourselves. And it may be that PFMLA is not the effective way to do it. Let's let them have the time to figure out how to do it right for Natick. Let's refer this.
Member Formica in the back.
Thank you. Amanda Formica, Precinct 2. Question through you, Mr. Moderator. Did I understand correctly that the town meeting would need to vote on this in order through Mass General Law saying that we need to vote on this as the legislature for the town in order for it to then be triggered as a topic in collective bargaining? Or is the law such that PFML could be adopted by the CBAs ahead of us voting on it?
Ms. North.
The obligation of the town as an employer to bring this up is predicated on accepting the statute. That does not necessarily mean the town couldn't bargain for something similar, but not the same benefit.
To continue.
And I also just wanted to make clear, I heard from the town administrator's presentation that it would make it easier, it would be easier to augment current offerings and cost less than to have this kind of consistent policy across the board. And I was just wondering what would make it easier, what would make that easier? If I understood correctly.
Mr. Erickson, the comment is attributed to you.
No, thank you, Mr. Moderator. If I said easier, I apologize. I meant to say that we want to look to see what types of programs may augment our existing offerings to determine how to go forward to try to get to comparable benefits. Sorry, that's a mouthful. I don't know if I indicated that it would be easier. I would argue we could probably find this more cost effective. Perhaps equivalent from an implementation perspective, and or might be simpler in its application because it might be simple, like policy changes, for example. But I don't know if I can answer whether it's going to be easier per se at this time.
I've been hearing a lot of people say, or in debate, I've been hearing a lot of concerns about what's right for Natick, but I'm just thinking that if over 3 million workers in Massachusetts, including those of us here who work for private companies or the state government or federal government, are already covered under PFML, what makes us significantly different than the people who work for the town of Natick as far as what our needs are? All of these different companies across the state, including many of which have their own collective bargaining unions, are now subject to PFML. I just don't see how town employees are significantly different or wouldn't be interested in this once we get more of that information. And it also, the idea that this would take away, PFML would take away from what town employees already receive. I think that PFML only augments it. So my company provides 20 weeks of paid parental leave, 20 weeks of parental leave. 8 of those weeks are unpaid, and now because of PFML, that full time is paid. So that's an augmentation. It's not taking away from a previous policy. And then lastly, I just think it sounds a lot like a chicken and egg situation, and when I think that the town should take the opportunity to, the town meeting should support this in order to trigger this process for our town employees. Thanks.
The gentleman standing, black t-shirt.
Stephen Owens, Precinct 7. This was touched on but not directly asked or answered, Mr. Moderator. Knowing that this article had come up before and would come up again, what discussions were had regarding any trigger clauses in the recent CBA contract negotiations?
Mr. Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Of the settled agreements, there was no desire to incorporate this into the collective bargaining MOAs, so therefore there's no trigger clauses.
To continue.
Mr. Moderator, how often do CBA negotiations involve employees requesting increased time off, if not specifically this, anything else?
Mr. Erickson.
Just to clarify, increased time off of any type? Almost every?
To continue.
If we were to amend this article now or when it comes back in the future to go into effect at a specific future date, because a lot of the concern is it going into effect immediately, when would the administration be able to implement it?
You want to amend this for a future date?
If we were to amend it to a future date, when would the administration be able to implement it?
Is that possible, Ms. North?
I do not believe it is. It's an up or down, accept or not accept.
Right. To amend this to come back for to be effective at another date? I think that's what you asked.
Right.
So you either vote this up or down, and it is implemented as has been explained by a couple of the speakers so far.
So this type of article could never be amended?
No.
Is that what you're saying?
No, it's an acceptance of the statute.
Okay.
Very clear, very simple.
So I do appreciate the town administration's position that they're unprepared at this time. If it doesn't pass at this time, I think we can be sure it will keep coming back until it passes. So I definitely think we should get prepared. I think we've heard a couple of things back and forth that are slightly disingenuous in terms of saying 12 weeks off at 70% isn't as good as 2 weeks off.
Let's not cast aspersions about anyone's character, whether it's disingenuous or not.
Okay.
All right, let's not do that in this hall.
Okay. We've
Very
heard
good.
that 2 weeks off at 100% is better than 12 weeks off at 70%. We've heard that we can't negotiate this until we pass it, and we can't pass it until we negotiate it. So I'm going to support this. I imagine it'll probably get referred, but
Awesome.
I'll support it in the future as well.
Very good. Mr. Gath, you have the floor. You need the microphone.
Bill Gaff, Precinct 6, move the question.
I'd still like to provide context to one of the debates, and I've been waiting for
I
a while,
see.
Mr. Moderator.
You have spoken once before, and the motion to, so therefore the motion to close debate is permissible. Mr. Coffey has his hand up. He has spoken once before. Those are the two people that had hands up that were waiting to take the floor. I saw no one else for the first time. The motion to close debate is in order. We'll vote that at this time. Where's my, all right, we're going to do this by hand. Jeff?
Can I talk while he runs up?
All those, what you're going to be voting on right now is to close debate. We move the question. All those in favor of closing debate, please raise your hands. All those opposed? I declare it a 2/3 vote. We'll now vote on the motion as printed on page 176. Point of order. Mr. Sidney.
I believe we wrote the referral first.
Oh, you're correct. Thank you. I have my note here. I didn't even see it. There's two motions on the floor. One is referral, one is a positive main motion. We'll vote the referral motion first. Do you have that ready? Please vote on refer the motion back to sponsor at this time. Yep. What? It's chilly in here. Time's up. Voting is closed. On the motion to refer, vote is 86 yes, 24 no, 2 abstain. The matter is now referred to the sponsor. Next order of business is Article 21. Article 21, Mr. Ostroff. I'm sorry? Where's the page? Oh, okay. Josh?
Mr. Moderator, Josh Ostroff, Precinct 6, I move to adjourn.
Seconded by Ms. Keeney. We'll vote that by a hand count. All those in favor of adjourning, please raise your hands. All those opposed? We are adjourned.